I wasn't prepared for the suggestion my nephew made last night. He sat beside me in a way I hadn't anticipated. Deep down, I knew I should stop it, but the desire was overwhelming, and neither of us could turn back. What started as a harmless conversation quickly transformed into something that would change everything between us forever. It was a peaceful evening, and I sat in the living room, enjoying the quiet that followed a long day. The low hum of the television provided a sense of normalcy, and a glass of wine sat on the table beside me. It had been years since I had taken this kind of time for myself. At 61, life had become calm, predictable, a routine I hadn't expected to be disturbed, certainly not by what was about to unfold. My nephew walked into the room. At 28, he was no longer the boy I had once cared for. He had grown into a thoughtful, mature man. Yet I still saw the same sparkle in his eyes, the same playful smile that always warmed me. He had always been special to me, maybe more so than I had ever admitted to myself. But tonight something felt different. There was an energy about him that I couldn't quite place. "Mind if I sit with you for a while?" he asked. His voice casual but deep, as if his request was perfectly normal. I nodded, motioning for him to take the seat next to me, though part of me sensed a subtle shift in the air, something I couldn't ignore. He sat a little closer than usual, his leg brushing against mine for just a moment. I tried to dismiss the spark it ignited, but my body betrayed me. It had been a long time since I'd felt anything like this, and I wasn't sure how to react. I reached for my wine, taking a sip to steady myself, but even that didn't calm the sudden nerves buzzing beneath my skin. "You know, Aunt Rachel," he began, his voice now softer, more intimate. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately." His words took me by surprise. I turned to face him, confusion and curiosity swirling in my mind. I searched his expression for some clue to his meaning, but the look in his eyes made my heart race. This wasn't the gaze of a nephew speaking to his aunt. There was something else, something deeper and forbidden. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaky despite my effort to sound calm. He smiled, a soft, almost secretive smile, and leaned in slightly closer. I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin, and my pulse quickened. This was no ordinary conversation. This was something more, something we couldn't deny even if we wanted to. "I think you know what I mean," he said quietly, his hand resting on the arm of the chair, so close to mine that I could feel the heat radiating from it. "We've always had this connection, haven't we?" I opened my mouth to reply, but no words came out. I couldn't argue with him because deep down I knew he was right. There had always been something between us, unspoken, but undeniably there. I had pushed it away for years, buried it deep inside. But now, sitting so close to him, with this intimacy between us, it was impossible to ignore any longer. I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, though my voice betrayed me. The lie was weak, too fragile to hold up under the weight of what was happening. He reached out then, his hand covering mine. His fingers were warm and strong, and I could feel the connection between us growing stronger with every passing second. My breath caught in my throat as I looked up at him, and the way he gazed at me made everything else disappear. In that moment, it was just the two of us, alone in this moment, with no turning back. "You don't have to pretend anymore," he whispered, his thumb lightly brushing the back of my hand. "I've seen the way you look at me. I felt it too." I wanted to deny it, to push him away, to tell him this was wrong, that we couldn't continue down this path. But I couldn't. The truth was, I had felt it too. For years I had ignored the subtle glances, the lingering touches, the way my heart would skip a beat whenever he was near. But now, with him sitting so close, his hand on mine, and his eyes full of something I had never seen before, I couldn't hide from it any longer. I struggled to find words, but before I could say anything, he leaned in closer, his face just inches from mine, and my mind went blank. All I could think about was him, his touch, his closeness, the way his presence seemed to fill the room. A warmth spread through me, a desire I hadn't felt in years, a desire I thought I had forgotten. His hand moved then, slowly, deliberately, sliding up my arm, making my skin tingle. I closed my eyes, trying to resist the pull, but it was useless. I felt myself giving in, letting go of years of restraint, of pretending there was nothing between us. But there was something real, something undeniable, and I couldn't fight it any longer. "I can't stop thinking about you," he murmured, his lips so close to my ear I could feel his breath on my skin. Every time I see you, every time I'm near you, I just want to be closer. His words sent a shiver down my spine, the intensity of them wrapping around me like a warm blanket. My heart raced as his hand moved to my cheek, his fingers gently brushing my skin, and without thinking, I leaned into his touch. It had been so long since anyone had touched me like this. I wasn't prepared for the way he looked at me. It was a look I hadn't seen in years, one that made me feel alive again, awakened in a way I thought was lost. "You shouldn't say these things," I whispered, though my words were weak, barely a protest. "We shouldn't," but even as I said it, I knew I didn't mean it. The pull between us was undeniable, a magnetic force far stronger than any logic or reason. He knew it too, and the way his eyes darkened with desire told me he wasn't going to back down. "I've wanted this for so long," he murmured, his lips so close to mine that I could almost feel their warmth. "I've wanted you for so long." Before I could reply, before I could even think, his lips met mine. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if he was giving me the chance to pull away. But I didn't. I couldn't. The moment his mouth touched mine, every ounce of resistance melted away, and I kissed him back with a hunger I didn't know I had. The kiss deepened, and suddenly everything else disappeared. All that remained was the heat between us, the way our bodies fit perfectly together, and the way his hand slid down my back, pulling me closer. The years of restraint and denial dissolved, leaving only the raw, undeniable need that had been simmering between us for so long. His hands explored my body, touching, seeking, and I responded in kind, my fingers tangling in his hair as I pulled him closer still. His lips left mine, trailing down my neck, and I let out a soft gasp as he found the sensitive spot just below my ear. My body trembled under his touch, and I felt a heat rising within me, a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. I knew I shouldn't want this, I knew I shouldn't be doing this. But the more he touched me, the more he kissed me, the less I cared. I had spent my life following rules, doing what was expected, denying myself the things I truly wanted. But in this moment with him, I wanted to let go. I wanted to feel alive again. I wanted him. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine, and I could see the silent question there, the unspoken need for confirmation. I nodded, barely aware of my own actions, but knowing, deep down, that this was what I wanted, what I had always wanted. His lips found mine again, more urgent this time, more demanding, and I met his intensity with equal force. Our bodies moved together in perfect sync, as if we had been waiting for this moment our whole lives. The world outside ceased to exist, and all I could focus on was the way his hands felt on my skin, the way his body pressed against mine, the way our breaths mingled in the small space between us. I didn't want it to end. I wanted to stay in this moment forever, to keep feeling the way his touch ignited a fire inside me, a fire I hadn't known still burned. But as the moment stretched on, the intensity between us grew, and I knew we were both nearing a point where control was slipping away. He pulled me onto his lap, his hands gripping my hips as I straddled him, my legs wrapping around his waist. The heat between us was almost unbearable, and I could feel the desire pulsing through both of us, growing stronger with every passing second. My heart pounded as his hand slid beneath my shirt, his fingers grazing my skin, and I shivered at the sensation. "I need you," he whispered, his voice rough with desire, his hands tightening on my waist as he pulled me closer. "I need all of you." His voice was thick with intensity, sending a wave of heat rushing through me. His words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning, filled with a desire that had been held back for far too long. I looked into his eyes, seeing the depth of his need, the unwavering way his gaze held mine, full of longing. My breath caught in my throat, my pulse quickening at the way he looked at me, as though I was the only thing that mattered. His hands on my waist tightened, pulling me even closer, until there was no space left between us. I could feel the strength of his body beneath mine, the warmth radiating from him, and it was overwhelming, intoxicating. His touch was gentle yet possessive, as if he was afraid to let me go, afraid this moment might slip away. But it wouldn't let it. I wouldn't let it. I leaned in, my lips brushing against his ear, my breath shaky as I whispered, "I'm yours." With those words, something shifted. His grip on me tightened, his hands sliding up my back, holding me even closer. His lips found mine again, but this time the kiss was deeper, more urgent, filled with all the unspoken words we hadn't dared to say before. The room seemed to close in around us, the air thick with the electricity between us, and all I could focus on was the way his mouth moved against mine, the way his hands explored my body as if he were memorizing every inch of me. I lost myself in him, in the way he kissed me, in the way his fingers traced the lines of my body, igniting sensations I hadn't felt in years. There was something primal in the way we touched, as if we had been waiting for this for far too long, and now that it was here, neither of us wanted to hold back. His fingers slipped beneath my shirt, his touch warm against my bare skin, and I shivered at the feeling. My body responded instantly to his touch, my pulse quickening, my breath shallow. His lips left mine, trailing down my neck, soft and slow, his breath hot against my skin. Each kiss sent a jolt of electricity through me, and I trembled under his touch, my body aching for more. His hands moved down my sides, his fingers grazing the sensitive skin just above my hips, and I couldn't stop the soft moan that escaped my lips. The sound seemed to spur him on, his lips traveling lower, leaving a trail of heat in their wake. I tilted my head back, closing my eyes, surrendering myself completely to him, to his touch, to the way he explored my body as though discovering me for the first time. I could feel his breath against my skin as his lips traced every curve, and it was driving me wild. My body was on fire, every nerve alive with sensation, and I felt a need building within me that I hadn't realized I was capable of. He pulled back briefly, his eyes locking onto mine, dark and intense, filled with a desire that mirrored my own. His hands gripped my hips, holding me in place, and I could see the struggle in his expression, the way he was trying to maintain control over the intensity of what was happening between us. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low and rough, as if fighting to keep himself in check. I nodded, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps, my body trembling with anticipation. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. That was all the confirmation he needed. His hands moved to the hem of my shirt, lifting it slowly, his fingers brushing lightly against my skin as he pulled it off. The fabric slipped away, leaving me bare before him, exposed in a way that should have made me feel vulnerable, but instead, I felt powerful. The way he looked at me, his eyes filled with admiration, made me feel beautiful, desired in a way I hadn't felt in years. "You're incredible," he whispered, his voice full of awe as his hands gripped my waist, pulling me closer. His lips found mine once again, the kiss slow and deep, charged with all the unspoken feelings that had been building between us for so long. We moved together, our bodies fitting perfectly, as though we had been made for each other. Every kiss, every touch was intentional, unhurried, as if we were savoring every second, drawing out the pleasure as long as possible. His hands roamed over my back, hips and thighs, each touch sending a surge of heat through me, making me want him even more. I felt his fingers slide down my spine, their touch light yet purposeful, and I arched into him, my breath catching in my throat. He smiled against my lips, clearly enjoying how my body responded to his touch, and his hands continued their exploration, gentle but thorough, in a way that took my breath away. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, our bodies entwined, moving together as one. The world outside faded away, and all that mattered was how we made each other feel, the way his touch sent shivers through me, the way his breath on my skin ignited a fire within me. I had never experienced anything like this before, this overwhelming connection, this intense desire that seemed to consume us both. His hands drifted lower, his fingers brushing the sensitive skin of my thighs, and I gasped at the sensation, my body trembling in anticipation. He pulled me closer, guiding my movements, as we lost ourselves in each other, the heat between us intensifying with each moment. I could feel his breath against my neck as his lips traveled down my skin, sending shivers through me, making me ache for more. The tension between us was building, the intensity of the moment growing, but neither of us was in a rush. We wanted to savor every second, to stretch out the pleasure for as long as possible. His hands moved slowly, deliberately, teasing me with each touch, making me tremble beneath him. I could feel his breath near my ear, the way his fingers traced my body's curves, and it was almost too much to handle. "I've never wanted anyone like this," he murmured, his lips brushing against my ear, his voice thick with desire. "I can't get enough of you." His words sent a wave of heat through me, and my body instinctively pressed closer to him, needing him more than I could express. His hands moved up my body, his touch gentle yet possessive, and I could feel the tension between us rising, the heat building to an almost unbearable level. We were completely absorbed in each other, lost in the moment, and I could feel the tension escalating toward a breaking point. My breath became short and shallow, my body trembling with anticipation as his hands moved lower, exploring me with a tenderness that made my heart race. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we gave in. The world around us disappeared, and there was nothing left but the two of us, lost in the overwhelming intensity of the moment. Our bodies moved together in perfect harmony as we let go of everything we had been holding back. It was more than I had ever imagined. The way he touched me, the way his body moved against mine, it was perfect in every way. The tension that had been simmering between us for so long finally broke, and we both surrendered to the raw, overwhelming desire that had been building beneath the surface for far too long. As we reached that final moment together, it felt as if time had stopped. The world around us ceased to exist, and all I could feel was him, his body, his warmth, his love. Everything else faded away, leaving only the two of us, completely consumed by the passion that had finally brought us together. When it was over, we lay there, our bodies still intertwined, our breaths ragged, the room silent except for the sound of our breathing. I could feel his heartbeat against mine, the warmth of his skin still pressed against me, and I knew that this was more than just a fleeting moment. It was the beginning of something deeper, something that had been growing between us for a long time. He pulled me closer, wrapping his arms around me, and I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. There were no more words to say. Everything we had been holding back had been spoken through our touch, through the way we had connected, through the way we had finally given in to the desire that had simmered between us for so long. As I lay there in his arms, his warmth surrounding me, I couldn't help but smile. This was the start of something new, something we had both longed for, and I knew that from this moment on everything would be different.